Because of intervening events, the discovery of this podcast is now little more than a footnote to history. Interesting because it contains one of the earliest references to the God Emperor's water fat ass. Footnote, Leo Wiggins and Abu Zafar died in the 53rd year of podcast production, the cause being mysterious and unknown. Unsubstantiated rumors persist that they are still recording the same episode to this very day.
Wow. I need to know the topic of the episode that killed us.
It's just like, I don't know, something really mundane, but we would just dissect it to death.
Yeah. It's a mailbag question that really sent us into an existential spiral that we never got out of.
Ooh, book club of Hunters of Dune?
Oh,
could be lethal.
That could be lethal. Welcome to Gam Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name's Abu.
My name's Leo.
And Leo.
Yeah.
We are back in black once again. Round and round we go. What goes around comes around. God Emperor of Dune, baby.
That was hot. That was great. Yeah. Hell yeah. That was cool.
Off the dome. I did not have that prepared.
Sonic. Sonic.
Sonic.
Sonic milkshakes.
Alrighty. Well, welcome back to yet again another God Emperor of Dune book club episode where we are diving into the pages of this incredible novel.
Indeed.
But before we get into today's reading, let's make Shout Out Mapes proud and take care of some very quick housekeeping.
Indeed. And first up, you know the drill. Spoiler warning. No spoilers. If you are caught up on these episodes, you've read all the pages we're talking about. We're not going to talk about anything beyond these pages and these books.
That's right. And a huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons, Case Aiken, Matthew Good, Gentlemen, Sihanouk.
They just see us quietly mouthing their names.
Case Aiken, Matthew Good, Case Aiken, Matthew Good, Case Aiken, Matthew Good.
Terrifying. That is the stuff of nightmares. Thank you guys. And listen, thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. You really,
that's right.
You make it possible.
That you do. Alrighty, housekeeping out of the way. You know the game plan for this episode, dear listener. We will begin today by going over a summary of today's assigned reading. Then we'll dive into a couple of takeaways and finally wrap up by chomping down on some delicious spice morsels. They're warming up in the oven as we speak.
Yeah.
So before we get into these chapter summaries, let's take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back to talk about chapter 16.
Welcome back, everybody. Our reading today begins, chapter 16, Sweet 16, as they call it. And our first chapter of the assigned reading is a weird one, because this is a report from the Bene Gesserit sister, Chenoa. Bene Gesserit sister Chenoa, about a secret conversation she had with Leto, which was found in her kind of records and notes after her death.
Right.
The conversation that they had goes very quickly to the topic of abomination. Now, as we know from Children of Dune, Leto never really overcame abomination. He kind of just quietly became abomination. Like, we're just leaving that behind. We're not worried about it. But instead of overcoming it, he survived and continued and didn't succumb by learning to coexist with his other memories. And Leto makes it clear how he feels about this solution to abomination. Quote, "I hate this thing, but it saved us. Ghani and I formed powerful internal alliances with ancestors who followed the pharaonic model. They helped us form a mingled identity within that long dormant mob. End quote.
Yeah.
As Leto said, I fucking hate it. It's lame. Gross.
I'm glad he's being pretty unequivocal about this one. You know, he's like, this fucking sucks, but it is the solution. You know, it's the way to manage this. Just what I have to do to put up with it.
But with that admission that he hates the pharaonic model and his referring to it as a literal disease,
Yeah.
we are given more and more evidence of basically like the personal sacrifices that Leto has made in pursuit of his golden path.
Right. I mean, he is dealing with the other voices in his mind and putting up with all of these other memories.
Yeah.
In addition to being a 3,500-year-old disgusting, gross worm man tyrant, this is yet another sacrifice he's had to make for the golden path. And we only know of it because we are inside his head and understand at least some of his emotions and thoughts. And it's one of the things that he is hoping to get across to Sister Chenoa here about the truth of his existence and the sacrifice of it.
Yeah, and she is surprised at kind of how forthcoming he is with all of this stuff.
Yeah.
She's like, thanks for telling me all these things, I guess. And when she asks him, like, why are you being so candid? Why are you telling me all these things? He's like, well, first of all, I know that you will obey me.
Right.
And also, we're not going to meet again. And then he launches into a TED Talk.
Classic Leto.
Classic Leto. She's like, I didn't get a ticket for this TED Talk because I didn't want to go to it. And he's like, that's too bad. You're here. And it's starting right now.
Yep.
And dear listener, you might have seen this coming, but we're going to talk about what he tells her to remember as if she were one of his journals. We're going to talk about that as one of our takeaways today.
That's right.
So stay tuned. But following that little TED Talk, Chenoa basically is like, well, now that I have this important information, I guess I have some leverage because it'd be silly for him to tell me all that stuff and then kill me. So, hey, Leto, you said we're not meeting again. Does that mean you're going to die soon?
Right.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I know.
Bold.
Bold. And Leto's like, nah.
LOL, no.
LOL, no. You thought, fool, you're going to die soon.
Savage.
Well, you're going to die at some point.
Right.
Basically, he tells her, you are going to die having never achieved the rank of Reverend Mother. Which is just, that's got to be, his bedside manner is terrible.
Yeah. Brutal.
He could have padded that up a bit. Because also he's like, oh, but don't worry. You'll be remembered for all of history because we had this chat and you're cool because you know me.
Right.
He's like, okay, are you bragging right now? What's happening?
Right.
And the chapter ends after their little talk with a dismissive archivist's note, basically reflecting on the historic significance of Chenoa's delivered message. Quote, because of intervening events, the discovery of this private record is now little more than a footnote to history. End quote.
Savage.
Yeah, brutal.
That's brutal. I also like how it sort of bursts the bubble of Leto's lofty promise, right? Oh, don't worry, Chenoa, you're going to die. It's going to be a whole thing. But it's cool because you know me, and now you know these words I'm telling you, and they'll be recorded in history forever, and you'll be remembered forever. It's chill.
Yeah.
And it turns out the way she'll be remembered forever is just as a footnote in someone else's history book. And it just leads me to think like how many lofty promises tyrants throughout history make and how few of those promises actually hold water.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to chapter 17. And folks, there's been a lot of talking and a lot of walking in the chapters thus far. All of that changes here in chapter 17, baby. Action-packed, to say the least.
Fucking whiplash. the whiplash I experienced going from like weird talking chapter to this, insane.
Such a fun chapter. So chapter 17 kicks off. We are back with the royal procession. We are back with Moneo, Idaho, the God Emperor, and they are coming up on a group of museum Fremen. And this is sort of a planned thing. Moneo knew this was happening. They are going to petition the God Emperor, and Moneo is allowing it. So this is totally a normal occurrence. Nothing to worry about here. Until Leto notices that up on the road, there's like this large gathering of nearly 50 Fremen. And all of a sudden, they're starting to shed their robes. They're acting out of sorts. And that very quickly turns into, oh shit, they're going to attack us, because it turns out they shed their robes, they changed their appearances, and those 50 quote unquote Fremen in the road are actually 50 Duncan, Idaho face dancer assassins sent by the Tleilaxu to kill the God Emperor. Holy shit.
Can you imagine 50 Jason Momoas coming at you? Aggressively, not sexually, because that's
okay. Yeah.
Fantasy nightmare, very, very different. But yeah, no, that's got to be, that moment is so crazy. Because even, I love, initially Moneo's like, wow, what beautiful pilgrim, outfits.
Right.
And then Leto's like, fucking clear them out. And it's like, why? What's happened? And then the purple robes come off and they've got Duncan, Idaho uniforms. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, this is a scene that I want to see adapted badly.
I want to see it adapted so badly.
Even just as like a short film, like if someone just tackled this scene.
Yeah, this chapter.
Dope. Yeah.
It would be incredible. Yeah, it's such a tense moment and such a fun scene. But then, the fucking melee kicks off, folks. Duncan, Idaho, face dancer assassins versus the fish speaker guards. They clash. And this is a no-holds-bar battle, folks. Knives, clubs, laser guns are fucking whipped out of nowhere. And in the middle of the melee, Leto himself jumps into the fray in like a full-on Grand Theft Auto, I'm going to run these bitches over. He switches his carts to suspensor mode and literally starts mowing down face dancers, just ramming into them. Quote, turning in a tight arc, he hit more of them on the other side, feeling the crushing impact of flesh against plasteel, a red spray of blood. Then he was down off the road into an erosion gully. End quote.
Yeah.
Wow.
What a Michael Bay paragraph.
What a Michael Bay paragraph. All we're missing there is like, and Megan Fox sat on a motorcycle in the shortest shorts you've ever seen,
Moneo's in the short shorts on a motorcycle.
I mean, we do get naked Duncan in a little bit.
It's
so
true.
I guess that counts. He's our Megan Fox here.
Duncan Idaho's our Megan Fox.
This is incredible. And just a reminder for the folks who may have forgotten.
Yeah.
This book has been mostly people standing around and talking or walking and talking. Yeah. And then we're hit with this paragraph where the impact of flesh against plasteel and the spray of blood is everywhere. Incredible stuff. Such whiplash.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Now, Leto gets the hell out of Dodge. He's sort of off at a distance watching the melee happen. And as things settle down, he observes the battlefield. And literally starts laughing.
Yeah.
He's just laughing, watching the bloodshed take place. And he's clearly enjoying the excitement of this surprise attack.
Yeah.
And notably, the surprise of the surprise attack, something he didn't see coming. And after the fight wraps up, the fish speakers win, although they take losses. All of the face dancers are wiped out. And this is when we get perhaps one of the funniest moments in the book so far. Because as Leto is scanning the battlefield, he spots the real non-face dancer Duncan Idaho. And listener, you won't believe how he finds him. Quote.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It was Duncan.
Yeah.
Naked. Of course. The Duncan Idaho without a uniform was not a face dancer. Again, laughter shook him. Surprises on both sides. What a shock that must have been to the attackers. Obviously, they had not prepared themselves for such a response. End quote.
this has got to be one of the coolest things to happen in a book ever.
Amazing.
And also the way that Frank gives us that moment where Leto's looking through the crowd going, I don't see a single person in the guard captain black uniform standing. Oh, damn, Duncan died.
Right.
You know, and
right.
for those sentences, as a reader, I'm like, oh shit, damn, I didn't expect that. And then we get naked Duncan. And I, of course, am now picturing Duncan surrounded by fish speaker guards and 50 Duncans coming at them and him going, my fucking clothes off.
Oh, God. Oh, damn it. Why
Yeah.
can't I get this belt unbuckled? Fuck.
As far as I'm concerned, the fish speakers who died in that fight only died because they were distracted by Duncan being naked so close to them.
Oh, yeah. They looked over and just went into cardiac arrest.
They just died from how hot he is. They're like, fuck. Yeah, it's weird. We lost fish speakers, but no Tleilax who killed him. It was very strange.
No
Friendly
wounds.
fire? No. They just died from him being hot.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Incredible. I agree. That is my headcanon as well. Duncan caused the death of many fish speakers by stripping on the battlefield.
Oh,
Either
my
way,
gosh.
after the fight, Duncan, Moneo, and Leto debrief. And Duncan and Moneo are sort of taken aback by Leto's reaction to all of this, how cavalier he's being. He's literally out here laughing and chuckling and amused about this whole thing.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we just lost like 30-some fish speakers and a bunch of courtiers died and there's bloodshed all over.
Right.
And Duncan also notes, wait a second, is your cart damaged? Did you actually get hit by one of the stray lasgun shots? And Leto says, yeah, I did. I got hit and don't worry about it. Quote, I am immune to lasguns. When we get time, I will demonstrate. End quote. Which we know is a lie. He's
It's
not
a lie.
immune to lasguns.
Very casually.
The shot just
lying.
missed him.
Yeah, or it hit him, and but yeah,
Like grazed him or like in a non-critical way and he healed fairly quickly. Like,
yeah,
we know lasguns are a thing he's afraid of because of the previous Duncan, because of lasgun Duncan trying to literally shoot him and him
Yeah.
losing one of his like flipper arm fin things.
yeah, or like taking the tip off of it or whatever.
Yeah. So it is bold of Leto to not only lie to Duncan's face and say, I'm immune, but
Yeah.
to double down and say, yeah, I'll show you later sometime.
Yeah.
Hilarious. But once again, shows us the facade that the God Emperor has to keep up, even with his closest advisors.
His demonstrations, like shoot my tail. Duncan shoots his tail, and he's like, "That didn't hurt at all. See, it's fine."
Moneo!
Moneo, get him out. Moneo gets Duncan out of the room. You just hear him, ow, ow, fuck my tail. Duncan's like, I'm convinced he's immune.
That's so funny. All right, so continuing with this post-battle debrief, Leto
Yeah.
also notes that while the Tleilaxu have gotten pretty pathetic at this point, they have gotten quite bold. And the reason for that is because of Duncan, Idaho. They are the sole supplier of Duncan, Idaho Golas to the God Emperor. They know the God Emperor will always want to new Duncan, Idaho. That's the way it's been for the last 3,500 years. And so they feel kind of safe in that monopoly. Maybe the God Emperor can't really wipe us out or punish us that badly because he needs us.
Right.
And Duncan is like, well, are they right in thinking that? And Leto gives a chilling response, honestly. Quote, they approach being wrong. End quote.
It's so hard to imagine this book without Duncan, Idaho. And it's
Yeah.
hard to imagine Leto's rule without Duncan, Idaho. But the fact that maybe he's like almost at the point where he'd be like, you know what, it's not fucking worth it.
Yeah,
That's crazy. That's
it's
wild.
crazy.
Yeah.
And it's a chilling statement. He doesn't say, oh, they're right or they're wrong or
Right.
I'm leaning one way or another. They approach being wrong. That's such an implicit threat.
Yeah.
Try it again, Tleilaxu. Fuck with me one more time and see what happens.
Yeah.
All right, so Leto's like, okay, we got to keep moving. Let's clean up here. Let's wrap up this whole assassination attempt situation. He orders Moneo to erase any trace of the attack and make it appear as though the 50 assassins didn't leave a mark. And the cleanup goes as far as literally replacing dead courtiers. Like,
Yeah.
we don't
Oh my
even want
gosh.
the number of courtiers to look different.
Yeah.
And it's poor Moneo's job to walk over to the courtiers who have just watched some of their friends, maybe family,
Yeah.
be slaughtered
Yeah. Yeah.
and deliver this news. Quote, warning them that the time of mourning was necessarily short. They had other loved ones at the Citadel, and they well knew the God Emperor's wrath. End quote.
Oh my God.
Wipe those tears, Jeremy, okay?
Yeah,
you can
you
cry
lost your
another
wife.
day.
Whatever. All right. You got kids. The worm might smush them. So, smile. All right.
Exactly.
Also, let's fly in. This is your new wife.
Right.
You walk arm in arm. It's crazy.
It's crazy. And again, shows us the lengths that the God Emperor has to go to maintain the facade of godhood.
Yeah.
He can't show any sort of weakness to the Tleilaxu or show any sort of weakness to the Empire, lest he invite future assassination attempts.
Yeah, I also definitely get this. Leto's bored. And I feel like this is a message that the Tleilaxu sent him.
Right.
And his response is trolling them, is being like,
Yeah.
you sent 50 assassins and they didn't leave a single, nothing happened. But not even being like, hey, y'all sent assassins and nothing happened. Literally just like, oh, what a great walk this has been.
Right.
And the Tleilaxu are like, wait, did they not show up? What happened? They're all dead? What? What happened? And Leto's like, I don't know what you're talking about. The weather was beautiful.
Yeah. That's a great observation. On some level, this is Leto just trolling the shit out of the Tleilaxu.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really funny way to think about it. And I think you're absolutely correct. There's a certain level of like boredom that Leto's just having fun with here.
Yeah. He's like, let's stir up the pot a bit. If it had been 52, maybe it'd have gotten me.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap up this chapter because by this point, Moneo has made the phone calls he needs to. Extra courtiers, Jeremy's new fake wife, are being flown in as we speak.
Yeah.
A new dome for Leto's cart is being flown in, so we don't see where the laser gun shot grazed it. And it's at this point that Moneo turns to Leto and tells him, oh, hey, by the way, we got a warning from the Bene Gesserit telling us that there would be an attack by the Tleilaxu.
Yeah.
And it's not the Bene Gesserit's fault that it arrived late. It's actually our fish speaker captain's fault, who basically wouldn't believe them, right?
Right.
And refused to relay the message. So Leto's like, okay, well, Moneo, tell the Bene Gesserit that they're going to keep their place in line. I'm not going to bump them up in their meeting with me, but also make it clear that they will be rewarded for this act of loyalty.
Right.
He is, after all, a benevolent tyrant.
Yeah, exactly.
When it comes to the Tleilaxu, though, Leto wants a bit more of an aggressive response. He tells Moneo that on his command, the Tleilaxu ambassador should be publicly flogged and fired from his position.
Yeah.
And to add to the audacity of this order,
yeah,
when Moneo's like, okay, what should our statement be, though, on why we're doing that?
Yeah.
Leto literally says, give no reason at all. Just do it.
Yeah. Because Moneo's like, okay, but we're not acknowledging the 50 assassin thing.
Right, we're pretending it never happened. So
yeah, so what do we say? And Leto's like, I'm sorry, do we need to say anything? Fuck you. Have the man flogged. And if they have questions, let them have questions. It's like...
Right, let them wonder.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And
it's such a clear fear tactic, right? Moneo's like, oh my God, Lord, like this is going to scare the fucking shit out of everyone. And Leto's like, yes.
Yes. Did I stutter? Sorry, did I stutter,
Yeah.
Moneo?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Such a fear tactic, such a tyrannical move on his part, but also such a clear message to Lilaxu, right?
Yeah. Well, our final chapter today
Yes.
is chapter 18.
Mm-hmm.
And in our final chapter today, the procession finally arrives at the festival city of On. I feel like we've been on that road for years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's been a minute. And as the procession enters the city, we get these cheers from the crowd, and the fish speakers begin to chant. Everyone's cheering, and they're all,
yeah,
yeah.
There's a vuvuzela in the background.
Just one vuvuzela. It's an antique Terran instrument. It's a torture device from old Terra. But the fish speakers start chanting, and they start saying a word that is hard for me to say, but I'll figure it out. Was it Sihanouk?
Sihanouk.
Sonic the Hedgehog. They begin to chant Sihanouk, and the chant has an odd effect on the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's like this reverent silence. Everyone kind of falls quiet, and they're kind of just listening to the fish speakers as they chant.
Yeah.
And there's awe and there's silence. It feels very mythological, or it feels very, again, ritualistic. It feels like this is part of this big mechanism as the fish speakers kind of continue to chant. Now, Moneo, marching alongside Leto's cart, thinks back on the first time he learned what that term meant. He's basically like when he asked Leto, hey, can you explain that word for me? And of course, naturally, instead of just fucking answering the question, Leto launches into another TED Talk.
Iconic.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Moneo. In the beginning, quote, I give the fish speakers only one ritual. The ritual is called Sihanouk, the feast of Leto. It is the adoration of my person in my presence. End quote.
Okay.
We will talk about Sihanouk as the second takeaway today, because it is really interesting, and it's fascinating to kind of hear how Leto explains all of the different meanings of that word.
Right.
Meanwhile, Duncan is kind of actively just taking in his surroundings. He's in a new place. He's with the procession in the festival city of On as it kind of makes its way toward the central plaza of the city. Now, being the consummate professional that he is, he had met with Leto before the festival to learn about On and to basically go over the security details, right? He wants to know the weak points. He wants to know where threats can come from, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, as they examined a blueprint of the city, Leto explained how the festival city was basically literally built for one purpose. This is a little crazy. Quote, public viewing of the God Emperor.
Iconic. Oh my God.
It's just a big old stage. The whole city is a stage, is a plinth for him to sit atop.
Yes.
And Duncan observes that all of these different pieces of the city, all the different parts of the city, like the embassies, the libraries, the schools, the Radio Shacks, the Ixian Radio Shacks that no one goes to, but for some reason they're still in business, take up less than a tenth of the city.
Yeah.
So less than 10% of the city is all of that shit. 90% of it's like worm stage.
Right. Just a grand stage for everyone to look upon and worship the God Emperor.
It's the biggest peep booth in the galaxy. You put in your $1 and the little screen comes down. You get to look at the worm. You're like, wow, the worm.
Madison Square Garden could never.
Yeah. He also sells out every show. And in fact, even the suburbs, even the places that everyone's living, the apartments, the flats, the condos, they're built in a tiered fashion with balconies that all look down on the central plaza.
Incredible.
So literally every inch of this city was designed with Leto being on display as the primary function.
Yeah. Every balcony points the same way and has the same exact view, right? Like you're not going to get the the New York balcony that just looks right at the brick wall building of the building next door.
Yeah. What a view.
And they're going to, upcharge you fucking $500 for that.
They're like, you get to look at New York architecture.
Right. Not like that. You get true views of the Central Plaza for your rental space and own. And that view is of the God Emperor down on that stage.
Yeah. I also get the impression there's like a really aggressive homeowners association who's like, you can't have plants on your balcony that block the view of God. You have to,
Yeah.
I'm sure that shit's full.
Oh,
I noticed
absolutely.
that, I noticed you have like a cute little thing on your balcony. We'd really prefer you don't.
Yeah.
It's like, shit, I got an email from the city-owned homeowners
The
association.
HOA is like real mad at me. All I did was put a cactus out on my balcony.
It's not okay. Cactuses hold water. You know how he feels about water. But Duncan, security-minded, notes, and we're kind of seeing this is a crazy security risk.
Yeah.
You think about like, you mean to tell me in a universe that has laser guns, every single like apartment has a direct line of sight on the God Emperor?
Incredible.
That seems a little risky. But Leto explains that it cultivates a certain myth, or that it kind of maintains a sort of belief that has cropped up surrounding the design of Own.
Yeah, I loved this.
It was really cool. I think this is really neat. Basically, the myth states that the ruler would walk among his people one night a year in a luminescent suit with no armor.
Yeah.
So just a lamp in the darkness, attracting moths, I'm sure. I'm sure he's swarmed by night bugs.
Yeah. Ugh.
And his subjects would wear all black and were not searched for weapons. So one night a year, ruler walks among his people as the most visible person there. Everyone could have a weapon. No one would know. And everyone's invisible and anonymous. And Leto explains, quote, if the ruler survived his walk, he was a good ruler. End quote.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Which is wild. Like that's Amtal for leadership for sure.
Yeah.
Like I have managers who would not make it through that walk.
No,
basically.
Absolutely not. And I think what's interesting is Leto is like fabricating this walk, the myth of this walk for himself, right? And Leto himself is stating, if no one assassinates me when I am literally the central point of focus in the entire city, that supports my leadership. Because everyone else is like, well, no one assassinated him, I guess. So maybe I'm the crazy one thinking about assassinating him.
Duncan's like, small point of order. Aren't you immune to everything? They're just like, you shut the fuck up. You shut up right now.
Right.
I don't know that.
And that's exactly where like the facade falls apart. Because Duncan basically asks, oh, so have we not searched anyone for weapons today? Like, this is a no hold bars sort of festival situation.
Yeah.
And Leto's response is, quote, not openly, end quote.
Yeah. There are some people who quietly disappeared.
Right.
But no, we didn't publicly search. There aren't like metal detectors.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved the myth here. I loved the facade. I loved how much Leto is like sort of faking it to build up his own persona and leadership. Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. And it's real, like true, like tyrant, autocratic ruler shit. Where like you build up this facade around you and you play into the myths. Like, to be clear, as far as I'm concerned, there was no leader who walked around in a luminescent suit and nobody stabbed him, right? Like that.
What the fuck? Luminescent suit? What is that?
Like,
it's not a thing.
That's literally a fairy tale. And Leto's like, cool, I'm going to utilize this fairy tale into legitimizing my own rule among the people. It's brilliant stuff. I loved it so much.
It's also, I see all of this because I think Leto knows Duncan well enough that he could prevent Duncan's from getting to the point of rebelling. Or I think he does know Duncan well enough that he could lock Duncan into a certain like rigid obedience. And he doesn't. And I see these moments as Leto knows that Duncan's not going to like this. Like, Leto knows that this is the kind of shit that Duncan would go, oh, you're like an insane person.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. I kind of see him telling Duncan all this stuff as a way of tipping the scale to make sure that Duncan doesn't become a fanatical follower and is still like kind of, figuring out how he feels about Leto.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment because I think Duncan already is skeptical, right? He
Right.
pledged his allegiance not to Leto, but to Duke Leto and Paul Atreides within.
Right.
So, yeah, I think there's a natural instinct of skepticism for all of these Duncan Golas that come in. And while I'm sure Leto could find some way to turn them into the yes-lording sycophants that people like Moneo and Nayla are,
Right.
I think you're correct that there is some value in having someone in your inner circle who's skeptical of you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he's like pretty transparent about how much of a facade this all is to Duncan.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the chapter wraps up and the procession enters the chambers beneath the plaza. And it's described, I'm like imagining the biggest like parking lot in the universe.
Yeah, enormous.
And as the chanting begins to subside, Duncan notices that all of the fish speakers like lining the walls of this underground space, their, quote, mouths were moving in unison, a silent word on their lips. He recognized the word. Sihanouk. End quote. Yeah, spooky, weird, creepy.
Yeah. It kind of goes beyond ritual into creepy territory for sure at that point.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it more in the takeaways. But that's our chapter summaries for today. A little bit of action there in the middle, a bit of bloodshed, a bit of a surprise assassination attack, and we've finally arrived for the festival. So I'm excited for the cotton candy.
Yeah, get a turkey leg, just a big old turkey leg.
Mm.
Well, we are going to jump into our takeaways just after a quick break. So don't go anywhere. When we're back, we're talking Leto's message to Chenoa, and we're talking Sihanouk. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, folks. Let's now dive into our takeaways from today's reading. And as promised, to start off today, we are going to talk about Leto's TED Talk to Sister Chenoa.
His first TED Talk.
His first of many TED Talks.
Yeah.
This one to Sister Chenoa. So in today's reading, he's walking and talking with Sister Chenoa, and he brings up some important points about history and godhood and the nature of truth. And we want to spend some time exploring these ideas a bit further.
Right.
So he begins by saying, quote, "Many people will look back upon me as a tyrant. Fair enough. I have been tyrannical. But even ordinary tyrants have motives and feelings beyond those usually assigned them by facile historians." End quote.
Yeah.
And just for the folks like us who may not have known right away, we looked up the definition of facile.
Yeah.
And facile is defined as, quote, "appearing neat and comprehensive only by ignoring the true complexities of an issue." End quote.
God damn it, Frank.
Incredible.
What a perfect word.
What a perfect word. Basically just oversimplifying history.
Yeah, I always get mad when authors use like really overcomplicated language to like I'm like, oh, you had the thesaurus handy that day. But this is like the perfect word.
Yeah. Yeah. It's perfect. I mean, it really leans into Leto's point here that history will reduce him to a single word, tyrant, right?
Right.
A mere tyrant. He will become known as just a caricature, lacking any of the nuance and depth that we, the reader, are understanding about him through the course of this book. And basically what he's trying to get across to Chenoa is that what he's telling her right now, what she is going to record down, plus his journals that he's writing, are to preserve some of that nuance, to try and get
Right.
some of that across to future historians so they can try to piece together even just a fraction of the whole picture that is Leto II, the God Emperor Tyrant.
Yeah. Yeah, he also burned some historians, which is like a tough look. But it's all very interesting. And, we have to kind of wonder at why the nuance matters. And some of it could just be his personal desire to say, the nuance about me matters, and I want people to have some nuance about me and not just reduce me to a single word.
Right.
But the other thing is, like, he does everything within his power to secure the golden path.
Yeah.
It's also possible that the lack of nuance would be a means of destruction.
Right.
And it's only by preserving some of his intention and some of the ends that his means were for, his tyrannical means were for, that clarity is necessary for the golden path to stay intact.
Yeah, that there's perhaps a further lesson to be learned from his journals for humanity.
Yeah, indeed. Well, the message continues, and he talks about how people will try to find the truth in his existence. Quote, "But the truth always carries the ambiguity of the words used to express it. You will not understand me. The harder you try, the more remote I will become until finally I vanish into eternal myth, a living God at last." End quote. And it's so fascinating to me that he introduces the idea of godhood. We hear the word God all over it's on the fucking cover. The word God is all over this book.
Yeah.
But a living God at last is not this promotion or this deepening of his value and he is disappearing, he is vanishing into myth, right? Into stories told, into lies.
Yeah.
He's vanishing into that mythology.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of Leto's godhood, as he's saying it, comes with him vanishing into myth. It's fascinating to me. It also introduces the idea of truth as it stands juxtaposed against the words that we use to try to describe the truth.
Right.
Like reality as opposed to the language that we have and that we're equipped with to articulate what reality is. And he'll come back to it a few times, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more. But it is notable how he's juxtaposing what is expressed or communicated. So specifically that category of words, myths, lies, things that people are saying or trying to like understand in like conscious thought, juxtaposed against what just is.
Yeah.
Unnegotiable, undeniable truth.
Yeah.
And I also get a lot of bitterness throughout this whole passage. This idea of a living God at last is dripping with like wry sarcasm. Like he's not celebrating his own vanishing into myth. He's like, I'm finally the fucking thing. Okay. Ugh.
Right. Once I become a myth in your histories,
yeah,
I will finally become the thing you think I am. Like he's very clearly stating,
right.
I'm not a living God right now.
Yeah.
You all just keep calling me that.
Right.
And when I will become the living God that you think I am is not until long after I'm gone, long after the myth of me has devolved into a thing that barely represents who I truly am.
And the harder you try to articulate, the further from the truth you'll get, because that's just not how it works.
Yep.
And he goes on to talk about his responsibilities as a living God and kind of the lack of accountability.
Right.
A lot of the God talk is like, you are identifiable but anonymous, I think is the way he says it, right? And I can't help but think about him saying, Moneo knows me so well but will never understand me.
Yeah.
Moneo identifies him, but he is still anonymous in some way to Moneo, his closest aide, right?
Yeah.
And even the idea that I'm not a leader, I'm not a guide, I am even in God, as a God, this is blah, blah, blah. Those are ideas, but they're also words, and they're labels and they're titles that are given by people who are led or guided or who are worshipers of God, right? Those ideas don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You just can't capture someone entirely in the idea of a leader or in the idea of a guide or in the idea of a God. And they all have their kind of blind spots, sort of.
Right. And to sort of, I think, simplify what he's trying to get across is think about what that means for the real world today, right? Like think of history, think of a important person in history.
Michael
Julius
Cera.
Caesar.
Oh.
Michael Cera. Sure. Michael Cera. What's the first label you think of with Michael Cera?
Hot.
Actor. Hot actor. All right, let's examine let's examine those two labels.
Yeah.
Hot and actor. Is the whole being, I'm going to regret asking this, is the whole being of Michael Cera, everything about the human being known as Michael Cera, encapsulated in the label hot?
Yeah.
Some may argue yes.
Yeah.
Is the whole being also encapsulated in the label actor, the thing he will most likely be remembered for in history?
Oh, no.
No.
Yeah.
You can't capture everything there is to know about Michael Cera by just knowing that he was an actor in movies. And I think that's what Leto is getting at. You can't know me, Leto to Atreides, by just remembering me as a god or just remembering me as a tyrant. By just putting these labels on me, you can't understand the whole of my being. So I think that's what he's really getting at here with Chenua.
Yeah. It's also because I didn't get the impression that a lot of this was like, oh, people are so interested in me. People are actively for thousands of years now going, why the fuck is he doing what he's doing?
Yeah.
What is this? Who is he? Why is he doing this? And he's saying, I get that they're curious and they want to know, but they're asking questions looking for like a label or a thing that's just not going to give them the information that they actually need.
Yeah, totally. And actually, this then brings us to perhaps the densest portion of this conversation.
Yeah.
Because he then says, quote, although much sought after, truth can be dangerous to the seeker. Myths and reassuring lies are much easier to find and believe. If you find a truth, even a temporary one, it can demand that you make painful changes. Conceal your truths within words. Natural ambiguity will protect you then. Words are much easier to absorb than are the sharp, Delphic stabs of wordless portent. End quote.
God damn. That's this little passage is so carefully crafted. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's wild. And sort of breaking it down and taking it piece by piece, Leto is once again juxtaposing the idea of truth, of absolute truth, against words and myths and lies.
Right.
The things that cannot capture the absolute truth.
Yeah.
And that last phrase there, the sharp Delphic stabs of wordless portent, may have thrown some listeners for a loop. And certainly fucking threw us for a loop. Because half of those words don't make sense.
I had 7 tabs open in my web browser. And I realized when we started recording, I was like, why do I have all these fucking tabs? Oh, it's that one sentence that I had to open 6 Wikipedia articles just to... Oh, my God.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'll let you do the honors since you have the tabs open. Please explain what the sharp Delphic stabs of wordless portent are.
Yeah, okay. So basically, Delphic refers to Pythia, who was the oracle at Delphi, which is a ancient Greek thing, person, who, according to legend, under divine possession by the Greek god Apollo, would literally issue prophecies and warnings. Hello, a divine oracle, huh? Pretty good.
Okay.
And then portent, I didn't even fucking know the word. And again, I was like, I guess I better look it up. And sure enough, Frank's batting 1,000. He's choosing some great words for these things. Portent is a warning or a sign, especially of something that is calamitous or some catastrophe. So to rephrase the sharp Delphic stabs of wordless portent, it's words are easier than wordless warnings from prescient oracles, right?
Yeah.
Words and lies, myths are easier than the wordless warnings from some prescient source.
Yeah. Wonder who he's talking about.
I don't know. He's talking about Nayla. Everyone's like, what? Okay, sure. Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's so tailored to everything that is God Emperor of Dune, and so tailored to Leto's philosophies, and that he's just nesting this within this little passage. It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's a powerful choice of words. And again, the point that he keeps making over and over again to Chenua is that the truth is a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And we will often cover up the truth with words, which will then build mythology, which can then devolve into lies.
Right.
And it's a slippery slope to go down for humanity.
Totally. I really appreciated the Greek connection, because obviously we know House Atreides is from Atreus.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just cool.
Yeah, the Atreides Greek connections.
He's like, I knew her. We were friends.
Pythia, yeah, we go back.
Yeah. She was great. Made a great casserole. Just a really, really solid casserole.
So, as a final piece of his message to Chenua, Leto concludes with this.
Yeah.
Quote, I share it all with you, even the greatest mystery of all time, the mystery by which I compose my life. I reveal it to you in words. The only past which endures lies wordlessly within you. End quote. That is the thesis of his message to Sister Chenua and, frankly, to all of humanity. The
Right.
only past which endures lies wordlessly within you.
It's also that quote, at risk of sounding like a broken record, better than Fear is the Mind Killer. Also, I see it all over the place. It was funny because as I was trying to get other opinions on what that means and what that quote in particular means to people. There were people who had in their like email signatures. There's bumper stickers and like fucking merch with it on it. Yeah. It's a great quote. And I'm kind of curious to hear your, what did that kind of mean to you? What did that last banger of a quote mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I think honestly, overall, like sort of my big picture thoughts on this takeaway and this whole idea of truth versus words is that Leto is making the point that absolute truth cannot be expressed with words or histories, right? We know he has a problem with histories and historians.
Right.
And he's saying that actually the very act of recording in writing or in spoken word introduces an element of bias and myth making that can't capture the whole essence of the thing you are trying to get to the truth of, right? If you are speaking of the God Emperor and writing a history about him, the very act of writing implies that there is some bias or that the well has been poisoned. The well of truth has been poisoned. And ultimately, like this speech, this TED Talk that he gives to Sister Chenua feels kind of like a long-winded, almost whiny-ish way of him complaining that people won't remember him correctly, right? That the myths around the God Emperor are so pervasive and so all-encompassing that these myths will drown out the truth of who he was at his core. And we've sort of mentioned it already, but that raises the question of why. Why is he so obsessed with his legacy?
Right.
That's not a very Atreides thing to be obsessed with, right? The Atreides are nominally our quote-unquote good guys who wouldn't just want power for power's sake or want legacy for legacy's sake. So then the question arises, is this something he's obsessed with because it's for the golden path? Because humanity needs to know these truths and needs to understand them in ways that simply can't be recorded in words.
Yeah.
For their future survival. Is this crucial for the golden path? I don't know. Like, is it just Leto 2's ego wanting to be remembered in a way that's not just tyrant? Or is it serving the golden path? And personally, I suspect it's a little of column A, a little of column B.
Yeah, I think the golden path, we don't know a lot about it, but
right.
It is clear that if part of the golden path is I'm going to force people into forced stagnation and then they're never going to accept stagnation again. And like that's like one of the core seeds of the golden path. I wonder if he's trying to educate humanity that the myths and the stories and the histories that we have shouldn't lock down our understanding of now. If we try to define and articulate where we are and what we're doing, using language to like, for anything. I mean, he's talking about himself and he's saying, me as tyrant, me as God, blah, blah, blah. But also for humanity, if humanity stops living presently in the moment and stops observing, how often do we see people get caught up in myths and let those myths govern them? Even if what myths are, by their very nature, is an inaccurate renegotiation of whatever the fuck actually happened.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, we are today dealing with institutions that are some over 1,000 years old who are pointing at words on a book going, this is why you should live your life this way.
Right.
And trying to keep people in patterns of behavior that are thousands of years old for no goddamn reason. I mean, for reasons, and again, I don't mean to rail against people's personal faith, but at the end of the day, I think that's also part of all of this.
Totally.
Is Leto going, hey, humanity, you have to learn how to leave like the myths that you have been told. You have to learn how to leave those behind because they don't have as much to do with your immediate reality as you would like to think.
Yeah. I think it also touches on another idea from these very chapters that we're going to talk about in just a minute here about Sihanouk. But Leto says to Moneo at one point, the word Sihanouk can encompass all of these different meanings because we've all agreed it does.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Any word can mean anything as long as a group of people all get together and go, yeah, that's what that means.
Yeah. In fact, that's every word. That's
in fact, that's language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that sort of circles back and feeds into this point where he's like, well, words can and do mean whatever they want to, whatever we decide they do. So in many ways, those very words fail to encompass the absolute truth. And so trying to use those words to capture the truth is a fool's errand. So it kind of circles back to another idea about Sihanouk as well. And just this very idea of how words are used.
Or that people are trying to use words and use more words, as many words as they can to get closer and closer to the truth. And it's like, no, that's just not, you are getting wrapped up in your own lies and your myths.
Yeah.
You're not getting any closer to the truth.
Yeah.
You will not understand the truth if you try it that way. Well, we can wrap up this takeaway now. And I actually brought over a prop. So for visual people, I have a Tibetan singing bowl here. Because it's important for a quote that I decided to share. So basically, I wanted to share a lot of this chapter about this idea of like reality and how words and language don't really get close to capturing what reality is. Remind me a lot of someone that I am very fond of, Alan Watts, who was a philosopher, did a lot of Eastern philosophies, and I think he was raised Catholic, and he had a very interesting life, and he had a radio show in the 50s and 60s. And you can still find his talks. He's got some really great talks on what it means to be human and nature and all of that. But this is a quote from Alan Watts. And this will involve a prop. Quote, "What is reality? Now, obviously, no one can say because it isn't words. It isn't material. That's just an idea. It isn't spiritual. That's also an idea. Reality is this. You see, we all know what reality is, but we can't describe it." Okay, you can stop prop. Okay, great. Now, beyond the fact that this was like very in line with today's reading and Leto's message, I found a fun little tidbit, which is that Alan Watts and Frank Herbert were friends.
Wow.
And apparently they befriended one another in the 60s, and Frank would go over, or they would have dinner together and just talk about stuff. And it's not a stretch of the imagination to say this is the kind of stuff they probably talked about. Like, this is the kind of shit they nerded out on, is like, what is reality?
Classic dinner conversations. What is reality? Can you pass the salt?
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, the reality is these green beans are fucking
Alan!
bomb.
Where'd you learn to make green beans this good?
You gotta use words to describe me that recipe, boy, because that's delicious.
The recipe can't capture how authentically delicious these green beans are.
Listen, these green beans don't motivate stagnation. They motivate. And we're not going to get caught up in the lies and the myth making.
Their wives are like, oh my fucking God, I need more
I
wine.
fucking hate them. Anyway.
We told them no goddamn philosophy. Not tonight.
No philosophy at the dinner table. And Frank's like, I'm thinking about a book with a big worm boy.
Alan's like, tell me more. Wait, let me get my gong.
Let me get my gong.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, Alan Watts says in like 3 sentences there what took Leto a 4-hour TED Talk to explain.
Yeah.
But what a beautiful quote. We all know what reality is, but we can't describe it.
Right.
And on some level, I think art of any kind, visual, auditory,
Sexual.
writing, sexual, of any kind,
Yeah.
is, I think, humanity trying to express the reality
Yeah.
of our existence.
Yeah.
And capture it in some incomplete way.
Totally. Yeah. That's great. Great point.
Beautiful stuff. Wow. I need that green bean recipe. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, that was our massive takeaway 1. Let's jump into our very next takeaway.
Yep.
And this one is all about the word sea and oak.
Right.
Earlier, we talked about how Leto explained sea and oak as a ritual for the fish speakers. But then he goes on and gives a couple more definitions of the word to Moneo. But before he reveals these definitions, he's like, you got to pinky promise me, Moneo. You can't tell anyone. Never reveal that I told you this. And the reason, as Leto explains, is because sea and oak is a word reserved only for the fish speakers. And, quote, they resent my sharing it with a male, end quote.
All right.
It's their word.
Yeah.
And he has given it to them. It clearly holds special meaning for them. They're literally chanting it.
Yeah.
And mouthing it silently. So, he's kind of like giving up their little secret to Moneo. So Moneo's got a promise, pinky promise to never reveal it.
I'm just quickly, I read these chapters, to be clear.
Oh, did you? Before this recording? Okay.
I did the reading. I didn't think about Sihanouk and this whole little passage in relation to his message to Chenoa, even though that's literally the order of them, the ideas being introduced.
Yeah.
And that idea that it's a word reserved for them, that it's one of their words, it's a word that he gave them.
Yeah.
Fascinating thinking about that in conjunction with his message to Chenoa.
After his whole speech about words and the truth.
And the danger of them and how they don't really have meaning. Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Here
cool.
he is using a word given to the fish speakers to prop up a facade, to lie to them about his godhood, basically. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So Moneo promises, okay, I won't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And Leto responds, quote, very well. Sihanouk means giving honor to one who speaks with sincerity. It signifies the remembrance of things which are spoken with sincerity. End quote.
Hmm.
And Moneo's response is actually kind of shocking because he's immediately skeptical and he wonders, quote, but Lord, doesn't sincerity really mean that the speaker believes, has faith in what is said? End quote. And that caught me a little off guard because I was like, what the fuck? Is Moneo calling Leto out here as the quote unquote speaker who doesn't have faith in what he's saying? Like, consider from last episode, Leto's rant about Torquemada and rhetorical despotism and how much he hates it.
Yeah.
While at the same time, he himself is using rhetorical despotism and that hypocritical hatred. Moneo obviously hears these rants, these TED Talks from Lord Leto, understands a lot of the hypocrisy of Leto's rule, and in this moment is almost seemingly calling Leto out. Like, bro, you don't believe half the shit you tell me.
Yeah.
And these fish speakers are like, and you're telling me Sihanouk means honoring someone who speaks with sincerity?
Yeah, and they're saying that about you?
Right.
Fucking why?
Why?
Also, 2 chapters ago, you just said that even if you present facts genuinely, you're not even, you're changing everything.
Yeah.
So like, you don't believe in words, period.
Right.
Like, you don't even believe, you're like, that's not truth. So fascinating. Good call, Moneo. God damn.
Yeah, good on him.
Yeah.
Oh, just you wait, Leo. It gets better. Moneo like leans in.
Yeah.
So Leto, for his part, is like unfazed by Moneo's doubt, and he doesn't miss a beat. He immediately responds, quote, "Yes, but Sihanouk also contains the idea of light as that which reveals reality. You continue to shine light on what you see." End quote.
Mm.
And once more, this is hilarious. I found this so funny for some reason.
Yeah.
Once more, Moneo is skeptical, and he says, quote, "Reality. That is a very ambiguous word, Lord." End quote.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. That's cool.
What a cynical statement
Yeah.
from the major domo here. At first, I was quite shocked. I was like, what? That's like a dark thing for Moneo to say in response to Leto. But when I thought about it a bit more, I realized that it isn't all that surprising for him to have this reaction or this outlook, because of maybe any other person in existence right now, Moneo has seen firsthand how Leto can shape reality to whatever he wants it to be.
Yes. Yeah.
Or he can at least shape other people's perception of reality into whatever he wants them to see.
Yeah. It's a mark of tremendous wisdom that Moneos doesn't accept reality as what I think most people realistically would be like, oh yeah, reality is the unnegotiable. It's the,
yeah,
it is. It just is. And Moneo's like, no, that's ambiguous as fuck, dude. Like, that's really? You got away with that? You got away with that definition?
Right, right. And the irony of Sihanouk, meaning shining a light on reality that reveals reality. Yeah, it's quite funny because, again, Moneo's cynicism here reveals some wisdom, as you've said, that he knows reality is so whatever Leto can shape it to be.
Yeah.
He has seen it firsthand.
Well, and to his credit, Leto's like, yeah. Literally the next quote here, quote, "Indeed." But Sihanouk also stands for fermentation because reality, or the belief that you know a reality, which is the same thing.
Damn, slam dunk.
Always sets up a ferment in the universe. End quote.
Wow.
That's pretty heady. Which is also, that's something, I feel like that's a lesson that Paul learned, right? Like, Paul believing in the reality of his prescient visions created some inflexibility with the choices he was able to make.
Yeah.
Saying here, belief in a reality, which is synonymous with reality, affects the universe.
Yeah.
And makes change in the universe. It's like, he's like, hashtag manifest.
Right.
Hashtag manifest your dreams,
yeah.
Moneo.
Truly. He's like, yes, Sihanouk means manifesting.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think Moneo's skepticism has kind of hit a wall, because he responds with basically the response that I also have at this point.
Yeah.
Quote, "All of that in a single word, Lord?" End quote. You're telling me there's 3 goddamn definitions? How big is this dictionary entry in the Oxford Dictionary?
Yeah.
Sihanouk gets like its own page of fucking definitions.
Yeah, on Wikipedia. See also Sihanouk. You're like, that's the same word.
What?
And then it's see also Sihanouk. You're like, what the fuck is happening? All of that in a single URL, Lord?
Yeah. It's wild. I mean, again, these are all very valid responses from Moneo. Someone who is in the inner circle with Lord Leto understands some, definitely not all, but some of the way the gears are turning and the way that Leto turns those gears in the universe. And finally, we wanted to share one more quote from this passage, because this is perhaps the most cynical thing Moneo says in the book so far. He quietly thinks to himself that he's added his own more sour meaning to the word. He's decided to add a bit to the definition himself.
Right.
Quote, "It means mystery and prestige. It means power. It invokes a license to act in the name of God." End quote.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay, so those are all the definitions. Those are the quotes. How then do we interpret this passage? Why did Frank write this? Why is Leto explaining these definitions to Moneo? Well, I think it's clear to Moneo, based on his skepticism and his cynicism, that this word is meant to build up the mythology around the god emperor for the fish speakers, right? It's a secret word he has given only to them. they are chanting it in his presence at this festival.
Right.
And the word itself is rooted in religious mysticism. And the meanings the word has been given are that Leto is sincere, Leto is the light that reveals reality, and Leto shakes up the universe. If you take those three definitions and apply them to Leto, yeah, our guy is really gassing himself up and saying, I am God. What about it?
Yeah.
And I think the reason to do this for Leto is because this reinforces the fish speaker's loyalty to him and their awe of him. Like, imagine if your God, whoever that is for you personally, literally came down, like knocked on your door and was like, hey, here's a cool secret word that only you and I know.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell anyone else about it. This is just for us. How fucking cool would that be? You'd be like,
Yeah.
oh shit. And then you learn the definitions of the word, and then that word is now intrinsically forever attached to the God that you already are in awe of. It's just like it's a feedback loop on their reverence and their obedience to the God Emperor.
You're like, I'm getting a Sihanouk tattoo post haste.
Post-haste?
Getting that word tattooed fucking immediately.
Immediately.
You know.
So I think to sort of like wrap up my interpretation and the overall takeaway here, it's clear from this passage and this back and forth with Moneo and Moneo's own thoughts, right? It is a license to act in the name of God.
Right.
It's clear that Sihanouk is yet another tool of religious manipulation and control for Leto. It's another tool in his toolkit. And it's one that he specifically uses to keep the fish speakers fanatically loyal to the God Emperor.
Yeah. It's, that license to act in the name of God is such an interesting, because Moneo's someone who knows that fish speakers are the ones that knock down your door and kill everyone in the room because of some plot, right? Like, he knows the shit that fish speakers do. And so we get some of that cynicism from his experience of the harm that this word may have brought to people.
Yeah.
And so it's all of the fine, the noble stuff, perceiving a reality, creating a reality, changing the universe. Those are fine things.
Yeah.
But he's saying, but it's also these other elements. It's cynical of him, but it's also, I think, something that falls very much within Leto's also parameters of recognizing his own hypocrisy and recognizing all the bullshit that he builds up to have this power and this control for the golden path.
Yeah.
For what he needs to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Leto intentionally isn't pushing back on Moneo's cynicism.
Right.
Right? He's sharing this as another Torquemada example, where he's like, yeah, Moneo, here's some more hypocrisy on my part. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like it's another pulling back of the curtain a little bit to let Moneo see some more of the picture.
Watch me try to manifest giving a fuck. Oops, I couldn't. See if I could manifest caring what you think about me. No, it's another fail. Yeah, that's weird.
Incredible. So that's a bit about the word Sihanouk.
Super cool.
And our second takeaway today.
Amazing.
Pretty incredible stuff. Another tool for the God Emperor to control his servants.
All of that in a single word.
All right, so those are our takeaways for today. Let's take a breather. Let's decompress. Let's process those and take a short break. But don't go anywhere, folks, because I just heard the oven ding, which means it's time to chomp down on morsels. There it is. My
Tibetan
oven makes a gong sound.
Yeah, Tibetan singing bowl oven. It's very archaic.
Yeah. What is reality? We'll see you in a minute, dear listener. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back, everybody. We hope you enjoyed your break. We hope you have an appetite for some yummy spice morsels. Our first spice morsel today, this sounds weird phrasing, Sister Chenoa is the spice morsel. We promise it's just in name. It's not cannibalism. It's just Anyway, we learned a little bit today about the Bene Gesserit sister, Chenua. And we also learned today about her passing. And so we wanted to share a little bit of her biography, taken, as always, from the Dune Encyclopedia. So, Quintinius Violet Chenua, fucking incredible name.
Yeah.
Quintinius Violet Chenua was born in 13670 AG. I don't know why I said it like that. 13,670 AG on Wallach 9. A lot of people born on Wallach 9. To a Bene Gesserit proctor, aide, and servitor of House Carino. It's kind of cool. Now, the story goes that her father, Shimon Rasnik, maybe, was lured to Wallach 9 as a part of a Bene Gesserit plan to breed him with one of their sisters.
Incredible.
Solid. He had apparently some valuable genetic data, and the sisterhood was like, we want that data.
Yeah.
We want those genes, dude.
Hello.
Come on over. We want those genes and what's underneath them.
Oh.
That's a pickup line. Or that's a reference to a fucking song. It doesn't matter. Now, hilariously, Chenua's parents, like, Hallmark movie, after school special. Not at all.
Oh.
It's like, it's so weird. Here's what the Dune Encyclopedia says about how her mother wooed her father.
Okay.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is about her mother. Quote, she was of a physical type especially appealing to Rasnik. Her seduction of the Carino aide was accomplished as effortlessly as her hypnotic command that he immediately forget the encounter.
Incredible.
He walked into the room and he's like, yeah, sold, done. We're here now. Let's do it. And she's like, all right, that was effortless. Good Lord. And then at the end, she's like, and forget everything. And he's like, where am I? Yep. I need to go home right now for some reason.
The ultimate one-night stand.
It really sounds like a 25-minute stand. Or, I don't know, whatever. I don't want to make assumptions about Rasnik's endurance in the bedroom. But yeah. Also, what's his type? I'm so curious. Anyway, Chenua began her Bene Gesserit training at 5 years old.
Yeah. And
in addition to normal classes, was assigned special lessons in mnemonics, history, and psychology.
Okay.
Now, she excelled in her schooling, very, top of the class student, and was reassigned to special private tutoring in her 10th year. So a long storied career of 5 years of being a child. And they were like, she's ready for the special training.
Yeah.
Now, the special training happened under Reverend Mother Tertius Marie Hargis. And this special training, by the way, typically happens in the acolyte or in the young, sister's 15th year of training.
Wow.
So literally 5 years ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
This young Chenua was killing it. Accelerated. Amazing.
She's one of those 4.5 GPA students who gets college credits in high school and then goes to college at 16 or something.
Yeah. Or wait, 5 years. So 13 years old is first day at Harvard. It's holy shit, that's a child.
Yeah.
What is happening?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild, but definitely, a signal of her brilliance as a young mind. And as she continued her schooling, it became more and more clear that Chenua excelled at record keeping in particular. And she would actually go on to serve as senior recorder, quote, on some of the sisterhood's most sensitive missions, including a diplomatic visit to Giedi Prime to revive another cult of Alia, end quote.
Heyo, we know that story.
We do know that story. We heard about it from, I think, the first Duncan in the book.
Yeah.
Wild. I love how everything's connected. So she was recording everything that happened there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Now, ultimately, we know that Sister Chenua died in her attempt to achieve Reverend Mother status at the age of 53 years old. But this is good news, I think, for those of us who are fans of Chenua. 900 years after her death, Leto's words, his weird promise of her being remembered for being his friend.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, they're going to love you because, you're cool. We're cool. She was like, weirdly, I feel like we are cool.
Yeah.
Like wordlessly, we are very cool. We are very chill right now. But sure enough, his words came true. 900 years after her death, a cult of Sister Chenua rose up around her as a figure, and she was seen as, quote, an enlightened visionary, a confidant of God.
Oh.
Shrines and churches were erected in her honor.
Hello.
End quote.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, it paid off. She obviously she didn't get to be a Reverend Mother, but Leto's words were true.
Yeah.
Let her know, like, hey, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, no cult lasts forever. This didn't persist until the end of time. But she had a good 400-year rule. A good 400 years is when the cult of Sister Chenua dissolved, basically. But hey, 400 years of having churches and chapels and, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. A lot of Reverend Mothers don't have that same bragging right.
No, not at all.
But it is at that time that her memory faded into history.
That's true.
And that's Chenua.
Sister Chenua, a real one.
A real one. Pour one out for her.
All right, morsel number 2 today is the recording angel Sihaya.
Mm.
Hello, we know that word.
Yeah.
When defining Sihanouk to Maneo, Leto says, quote, Sihanouk also contains the summoning to prayer and the name of the recording angel Sihaya, who interrogates the newly dead. End quote. So, yet another definition for the word Sihanouk. Now, Sihaya is a word we've all heard before.
Yeah.
It means desert spring, and it's the loving nickname that Paul has for Chani. And this is yet again in this book another example of a character we know from the earlier novels becoming a part of the fabric of Leto's universe, right?
Yeah.
Consider the terms we've already heard. The Idaho River, the Kynes Sea.
Yeah.
The phrase Jessica type. Here, once again, the angel Sihaya. Now, it's interesting to consider the way in which Leto's mother has been immortalized, in a way. She's become a part of his religion as a literal angel, which is interesting. She's not relegated to a sea or a river.
Yeah.
And if we were to consider this in the religious context, Sihaya, as the recording angel, is seemingly playing a similar role in Leto's religion to the angel of death in Abrahamic religions today.
Right.
So in Judaism, the angel is called Samuel. In Islam, it's Azrael. In Christianity, they don't give the angel a name, but it's referred to sometimes as the destroyer or the angel of the Lord.
Right.
And this angel is usually, in these religions, portrayed as terrifying yet merciful. And the angel is often responsible for the taking of souls and the interrogation of the dead, which sounds quite similar to Leto's recording angel Sihaya.
Right.
Now, I do want to allow for the possibility that Sihaya is some sort of ancient Fremen or Zensuni angel from some very old religion that perhaps Leto is just now co-opting for his purposes.
Yeah.
And maybe not something that he invented to immortalize his mother, right? His mother is literally Chani. So both of those possibilities could exist. It could be some ancient religion from back in the Zensuni days that Leto is now recycling and reusing for his own purposes, for Sihanouk, for the fish speakers, for the religious mythology around him.
Mm.
Or it could be a very conscious and deliberate choice to build his father's loving nickname for his mother into his own religion as sort of a way personally to immortalize the mom that he never got to know. Fun to think of it both ways. Could be A, could be B.
My headcanon is definitely column A because we know one of the only people that Leto ever loved deeply was Ghani. And we know that Ghani only avoided abomination because of the protection of Chani and her other memory.
Yeah.
And we also know that Paul is very forward in Leto's consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about all of those things together makes a lot of sense to make this sort of like angel, this presence, this like divine, piece of the mythology. The, mother that you're right, he never knew. Their birth took her life.
Right.
But he knows the other voice, the other memory, Chani. And in fact, Chani nearly like took Ganima's body, right? There was that terrifying sequence, which is very sort of angel of death, taking so it's all there. It is possible the other one, but I really like that. That's so cool. That's so dope.
I think it's a fun I'm with you. I think it's a fun interpretation to assume that Leto has consciously chosen to immortalize his mother in this way by making her an angel in his religion. But as with many things in Frank's universe, it's not set in stone, up to interpretation.
Right.
And that's it.
That's it. we made it. Woo! Man. Yeah, Leto's in that other room. Oh, my tail!
My tail!
Oh! I mean, it's immune. Oh, it doesn't hurt at all. Oh, God, it feels good, in fact.
Shoot me again.
Shoot me again. Oh, damn it. Fuck, I mean, it's good. Well, we've got some assigned reading for you.
We do.
Which I'm also going to do.
Yes. In fact, I expect you to. I hope you do. It's going to be a tough episode if you don't. I promise you.
I will. I definitely will.
Excellent. Now that you've said it on the record, listeners, hold Leo to that promise.
Bother me in Discord if I've done the reading. Yeah, well, okay, it's going to be chapters 19 through 21.
Yes.
And if your edition of the book is different than our edition of the book, you should read until the chapter that ends on someone saying the sentence, quote, quote, "They must be replaced by human wolves. See to it." End quote.
I can't wait to find out what the fuck that means.
Yeah, that's quite the sentence.
That's amazing.
Well, before we go,
yes,
let's do shout out Mapes Proud and take care of some final outro housekeeping.
That's right. We want to remind you of some ways to support us and keep in touch.
Indeed.
And the best way to support us is to become a patron at patreon.com/GomJabar.
Yeah.
Not only will you be helping us continue to keep this podcast up and running, you'll also get cool benefits like ad-free episodes, weekly blooper clips and cut content that never makes it into those final episodes, and an invite to our exclusive Discord server that is only for patrons. We've got a geeky little fun community there, and it's really popping off. You should have seen that Discord server on the day the Dune trailer dropped.
Oh, it was
so
great.
Fucking fun. So that is the best way to support this show. Patreon.com/GomJabar.
Indeed. Another great way to support us is check out our merchandise, GomJabarShop.com. It's a website. You type it in a web browser and it's hit enter.
Hell yeah.
And you'll get there. We've got apparel. We've got art. We've got stickers. We got mugs. We got stuff. It's all Dune themed. It's original art.
Wow.
We hired artists. We made art ourselves. It's great. GomJabarShop.com. You can pick up something for yourself or a friend or whatever. Yeah.
That's right. For your Sihaya.
For your Sihaya, your angel of death. You're like, hey, the destroyer.
Hey.
I got you a tank top. The destroyer's like, thank you.
You live another day.
You live one more day. Bring me more Gomjabar Shop merch. Did you buy that from GomJabarShop.com? What a great website.
What a great website.
Thanks to the destroyer.
Alrighty, so the final reminder for y'all before we let you go today is to email us.
Yes.
GomJabarPodcast@gmail.com is the place to get in touch. We would love to hear your thoughts as you read along with us.
Yeah.
Send us your questions for a future mailbag episode. Send us cute pictures of your pets. We love it all. We love to get your messages. We do our best to respond to each and every one at some point eventually.
Yeah.
We can't promise it'll be timely, but we'll get back to you eventually.
We will.
GomJabarPodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from you.
We do indeed. It doesn't hurt at all. Shoot me again. No, it's fine.
Moneo.
Moneo, get him out of here quickly,
Get
Moneo.
the bomb.
Get the
Get the bomb. Get
I need the aspirin, Moneo. Not because it hurts. Just cause.
Not just one ibuprofen, Moneo. Give me 2. I mean, for a creature of Leto's size, I don't think 2 ibuprofen would do anything, actually.
I think like 3.
3. 3. I'd go with 3.
3 bottles of it. It's just
Right. We're talking bottles. 3 bottles of ibuprofen to make his migraine go away.
yeah. Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. We're also on TikTok at Gamjabar Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the golden path.